Good afternoon, my fellow, I don't know, let's just call them seekers of wisdom. It's me, it's Herbie, and it's another day of man-dog wisdom. Speaking of dog, where is my dog? I just have her wandering around. She won't go anywhere. Anyway, you can tell I do this very spontaneously. Pepper's right here. Pepper! I have no idea where she is. Anyway, she'll show up. You'll see her come in over my shoulder. Do I kind of see her back there? Okay, anyway. Let's get started. I want to talk today a little bit about, I make the case over and over and over that at the root of all crime, homelessness, addiction, and loss in the United States lies the broken nuclear family. And the reason that black people get incarcerated at a disproportionate rate is because right now, about 18% of black children are born into two-parent families, and the other 82%, there's Pepper over my left shoulder, the other 82% are born into single-parent families, and this is a broad generalization, and there are exceptions, many exceptions, but generally speaking, if a man's going to be a criminal or a woman, it's almost always as a result, at least to the majority extent, of being raised in a single-parent family. Sure, there are good single parents. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that every single parent raises a criminal. I'm saying that nearly every criminal is raised by a single parent, and that is not some kind of coincidence. It's why you always see the mother after the shooting. It's always like, why did they kill my son? Well, because there's no father out here asking that same exact question. But before I get into the critical way that I'd like to see you reason and to do this the right way, Pepper, oh, there she is. Snapping my fingers like I'm magic. She's a terrier. If you ever get a terrier, they listen when they feel like listening, which is, by the way, kind of healthy, so I never get aggravated. Anyway, where was I? Oh, and the reason I'm not walking around the park today or going out hiking is because the sun is bright and I waited too long and I was playing around with other stuff and got distracted, and before I knew it, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon and the sun was beating down at its apogee, and I'd rather sit in the shade because, well, look at me. I couldn't be a whole lot wider. Anyway, I wonder if anyway, I don't want to go down that road. I was going to say maybe you should call me Peach. I think when I look at myself, I'm kind of Peach. But anyway, where's Pepper? Pepper! I think she's just lying in the shade over there. Okay, I'm just going to leave her alone. Back to the subject matter at hand. So there are people that I call race hustlers, and what they do is basically sell victimhood. But I want to let everybody off the hook that isn't a race hustler or DEI proponent, or if you have a degree that ends in studies, you have a useless degree. The word studies, blank studies, any kind of blank studies is, generally speaking, a useless and worthless college degree. I'm starting to think that all college degrees are worthless, but that's another story for another day. Anyway, where was I? All right, so one of the many myths. Hey, John. I'm waving at my friend John. I'm recording, John, so I'm just don't pay attention to me. I'm talking to myself. Okay. So anyway, you can tell I do this very spontaneously. So one of the many, many excuses given by those that are race hustlers and purveyors of critical race theory and other things, and the reason that they talk about white privilege and particularly white male privilege. So I want to discuss that. And recently, the hot topic seems to be the colonial history, the history of colonialism and how colonialism and white colonialism have destroyed the world, yada, yada, yada. So I want to make a couple of quick points, but I want to let all of you off the hook who buy into that philosophy because you've been listening to propaganda that's been fed to you via your cognitive biases. We all have cognitive biases. Some people kind of bias right, some people bias left, but we tend to seek out our information from places that echo back to us what we want to hear. You don't see, a right-wing conservative listening to MSNBC, and you don't see a progressive listening to Fox. It just doesn't happen. So all that happens is you're in an echo chamber of your own cognitive bias, and you really don't get to see the big picture. So if you hold an opinion like that it's white male privilege or white oppression or white colonialism, whatever you want, European colonialism, call it whatever you want, I'm letting you off the hook. You just don't, you haven't looked at it critically because also there's a very good chance you went to an American public school which taught you how to do absolutely nothing, and you graduated maybe able to read and write. So, I don't want to like accuse anybody for not knowing, but here it is. Couple of points. First of all, let's go to white privilege. The other day, someone sent me an email to prove how wrong I was, and it said, the average net worth of the average black family in the United States is $21,000 and change. I forget what the change was. And the average net worth of the average white family in America is $171,000. How do you explain that? And I I explained it, and he said, "There's your proof of white privilege. Try to explain that." And I said, "Well, the average Asian family in the United States has an average net worth of $331,000. So whites are shitty racists because the Asians are kicking the shit out of us." I mean, it's such a stupid argument. Okay, there is no white privilege is a manufactured way to solicit government funds and grants to useless sociologists who have nothing better to do but study this crap. Now, the other point I want to make is about colonialism. Let us think about, just for a moment, let's think scientifically and not politically. Every single human being on the planet Earth began in what is today Kenya, Africa. We know that for a fact. Now, I know some of you who don't buy into evolution, so maybe then it was Adam and Eve. I don't want to get into what year it was. I don't want to discuss the pros and cons of evolution, but the genetic fact is, through millions of DNA tests, all of us have a small percentage of African blood in us, period, end of story, which means, if you think remotely critically, that every single person in the world has been either a conqueror or the conquered at one time or another. All of us have been both, because all of the land had to be conquered. And it's like, for example, I'll give you a good example of an ignorant position held by a lot of people with bad education in the United States. You hear a lot about how the white man came to the United States and then rolled across and threw the Native Americans off their land. Well, here's the thing. They've been throwing each other off their land. For example, we all know about Custer's famous battle where it was at the Little Bighorn. What was his name? Sitting Bull massacred Custer and his troop, army, regiment, whatever it was. Lab vehicle going by. And those were the Lakota Sioux. And that was their land, except the Lakota Sioux took it from the Cheyenne about 80 years before that. And the Cheyenne took it from the Osage about 60 years before that. In other words, it was inevitable. I mean, everybody was... The largest Indian empire of North and Central America were the Comanches. The Comanche Empire went from central Mexico all the way up to the northern Great Plains at one point, and they basically conquered everybody. They wiped out whole tribes. Ask the Apaches how they feel about the Comanches. Ask the Navajo how they feel about the Comanches. Ask the Sunni how they feel about... Is it the Sunni? Or am I confusing that with Muslims? Zunis. So, sorry. Is it Z-U-N-I? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not an expert in everything Indian, but you get the point. Every single inch of this planet has been conquered, reconquered, reconquered. It's called the right of conquer. That's what makes this whole argument with Israel ludicrous. Okay? Israel is a fact. Were there Arabs and Jews on that land before? Sure. Are the Jews in control of Israel? Yes, although it's the only country in the Middle East, I digress slightly, where Arabs have full civil rights and sit in a free parliament, freely elected in unfixed elections, and have their individual rights, and they're innocent till proven guilty, just like English common law has everywhere. But I digress. Israel is a Jew majority country, a Jewish majority country. Therefore, the charges made, they're imperialists. Tell me the war of conquer. They were handed the territory from the imperial power, which was England, in return for providing troops to fight the Germans in World War I under the Balfour Declaration, but I digress. That was, by the way, my great-grandfather fought in the Jewish Corps in Israel in World War I against the Ottoman Turks, who had, by the way, had conquered that area before that, and before the Ottoman Turks, there were a whole bunch all the way back through the Romans and back. It's bullshit. It's the right of conquering. Once you take the land, it's yours. And the Native Americans, by the way, were going to be conquered by somebody. They were lucky it was by Northern Europeans, not Southern Europeans. The Spaniards were much harder on the natives of the lands they conquered than the English or white European, Northern European lily white people were, because it could just as easily, all of America, we could all be speaking Spanish, but for an accident of history. But the Indians were going to be conquered. My God, man, they never invented the wheel. I mean, they were ripe for conquering. The Indians dragged around their crap on sleds. They didn't even invent the wheel. They lived in nomadic bands. They never had a chance. If it wasn't going to be us, it was going to be somebody else. If you're going to think critically, you have to think not in a fairy tale. And you have to see the world as it is. And there are certain facts from which you then start to think like, as I often say, a chess player and not a checkers player. But is there a legacy of colonialism? Well, yeah, if you consider we've all been colonized and been colonizers, but no, nothing that affects anybody in the present. That's just an excuse. And people will not succeed, regardless of any other reason, if they're not dealing with reality as it is. Whining about something that isn't true is not going to ever get, you can't will a falsehood into fact. You just can't. I'll leave it at that. I can go on and, obviously I can go on and on and on. Anyway, have a beautiful day. I'll be back with you dudes and dudettes tomorrow. Don't forget to go to the 1964plan.org and check out the white papers that are free for you to read, and hopefully get involved and, God willing, make a contribution and help us spread the word to restore the traditional nuclear family and to end crime, make crime negligible, make poverty negligible, make addiction negligible, make homelessness negligible, and make America what it was in 1964 after it passed the Civil Rights Act. That's where the title comes from. 1964 was the year of the Civil Rights Act, which meant that all discrimination was illegal in the United States, as it should have been from that day forward. Okay, now, does that mean that all discrimination is gone? Of course not, but it's against the law, and before 1964, it wasn't. Okay, so from that point forward, and at that point, we had the world by the ass. We were rich. We weren't involved deeply in Vietnam yet. We hadn't screwed up our entire economy. We hadn't borrowed ourselves into $33 trillion. Our national debt was less than $1 billion. I know that's hard to believe, but go ahead, fact check me. Think of what life would have been like if we would have kept the traditional nuclear family intact, if we had maintained decency in our culture, and where we would be today with all the protections of the Civil Rights Act together with common sense, critical thinking, and a solution. And that's what the 1964 plan is. Please check it out at the 1964plan.org, like I said. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is Herbie. Peace out.